The pain I felt was unbearable, both physically and emotionally, yet nothing could have prepared me for what came next. My husband, the person I had spent years building a life with, had abandoned me in my moment of greatest need. I was in labor, and he was nowhere to be found. To make matters worse, my brother, my only source of comfort in those harrowing moments, later told me that my husband had been told I didn't make it. And now, as I was trying to recover from all the trauma, my husband wanted me to sever ties with my brother. The nerve! It all began just a week before our daughter's birth. A suggestion that seemed innocent at first, a paternity test for our daughter. His voice, casual, dropped the bombshell. To be clear, there had never been any reason for him to doubt me. I was a homebody. I worked from home, spent my days in our quiet little space, and rarely went out. My social circle was small, only my brother, and even then, the connection was innocent, familial. I couldn't fathom why he would think such a thing, especially now, as I was about to bring our child into the world. At first, it was like a slap across my face. I felt my trust in him shatter. To accuse me of cheating, especially after all these years of loyalty, of building a life together, was not just unreasonable, it was devastating. But instead of offering an apology, or even trying to understand my hurt, he dug in. I just want to be sure, he kept repeating, as though my integrity was up for debate. For 3 days, this conversation circled like a dark cloud, looming over every moment. The tension gnawed at me, eating away at my peace. I began to feel ill, as though the stress had seeped into my very bones. There was no room for reconciliation. No room for a compromise. I told him I couldn't continue like this, not when I was so close to giving birth. The emotional toll was suffocating. I couldn't do it anymore, not in that toxic space. I packed my things, just the essentials, and walked out. I didn't have the energy to fight anymore. I needed to get away, to find some peace, and I sought refuge with my brother. My brother took me in without hesitation. His home became the sanctuary I needed. His understanding, his calm presence, were the only things that could steady my shaken soul. But I tried again. I called my husband, hoping, wishing that he would finally understand. My heart was raw, and I needed him by my side. But no matter how many times I dialed his number, the phone just rang. Voicemail after voicemail, silence after silence. Did he even care? Didn't he feel the urgency in my calls? My anxiety deepened with each unanswered ring. Frustrated and in agony, I called my brother. His response was quick. He was coming. As he drove to pick me up, he tried calling my husband repeatedly, hoping for some kind of response. But the silence persisted. It felt suffocating, like a thick fog closing in on me. As the pain intensified, I tried to focus on the hope that maybe, just maybe, he would show up in time. But the ride to the hospital was agonizing. Every bump in the road seemed to tear at my body, and the contractions were relentless. My brother, calm but clearly distressed, tried to keep his composure for me as he drove as fast as he safely could. His wife, a nurse, guided us over the phone. But things got worse. I could feel the urge to push. Panic overwhelmed me. We were still miles from the hospital. The realization was suffocating. There was no way we were going to make it in time. In the cramped back seat, my brother pulled over, and his wife, still on the phone, told him what to do. It was a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. There, in that car, I gave birth to my daughter. The pain was beyond description, and the fear of the situation, of what could go wrong, was overwhelming. I could feel the blood, the weight of everything going wrong. By the time we reached the hospital, I was in critical condition. I was rushed into surgery, the doctors scrambling to stop the bleeding. The emotional and physical toll was unimaginable. It wasn't just the trauma of the birth, it was the fact that I couldn't hold my daughter without being reminded of the hell I had just gone through. Each time I looked at her, my heart swelled with love, but there was also that gnawing pain, a constant reminder of the fear and sorrow I had endured to bring her into the world. The recovery was slow, physically and emotionally. The woman who had helped me through it all, my brother's wife, was a rock. Her medical expertise and calm demeanor had been invaluable. But even she knew, as I did, that this kind of emotional healing couldn't happen overnight. And then, after everything, after hours of pain and uncertainty, after I had finally started to come around from surgery, my husband called. 10 hours. It had taken him that long to respond. I was groggy, disoriented, still struggling to process everything that had happened. My brother was there, every step of the way, handling calls, managing family updates, keeping everything from falling apart. But when my husband's call finally came, my brother's face told me everything I needed to know. His expression twisted with a mixture of relief and fury. How could it have taken him so long? Husband's behavior in this situation. The urgency, the fear, and the helplessness I felt when I was in labor, alone, isolated, are impossible to forget. I thought of him. I tried, with everything in me, to reach out. But the silence, the unbroken silence from the man who was supposed to stand by my side was deafening. Hours passed. My world was crumbling. His calls went unanswered, each ring falling into an abyss of uncertainty and growing dread. How could he not see the urgency? How could he not hear the distress in my voice, in my heart, with every call I made, begging for him to be there? Then my brother took over. His steady hands and calm words were the lifeline I desperately needed. But when my brother answered my husband's frantic calls, his voice shook with raw emotion, barely contained. "She didn't make it," he said. No hesitation, no second thought. The words hung heavy in the air. He ended the call without waiting for a response, his hand trembling with rage and sorrow. And I, so close to slipping in and out of consciousness, had no idea the storm that was brewing outside my fragile bubble of pain. By the time my husband arrived at the hospital, I was beginning to wake up, disoriented, weak, unable to comprehend the chaos unfolding around me. His face was a blend of panic, guilt, and desperation, each emotion fighting for dominance. He stormed into the room, his voice rising with confusion and anger. "Why didn't you answer my calls? What's going on?" His words hit me like a slap to the face. How could he ask such a thing, when he had ignored me for hours, leaving me alone to fight through the pain? Before I could even grasp what was happening, the hospital staff intervened, escorting him out to protect me from the emotional turmoil he was causing. I was too fragile, too confused, to understand the full scope of the situation. The nurses needed my signature to allow him back in, but I could barely focus, my mind swirling in a haze of exhaustion and shock. My brother, for all his harshness, had acted out of a primal fear, a fear that every second spent waiting for my husband had felt like a lifetime. A lifetime of agony and bleeding and panic, with no one there. No one but him. My sister-in-law, though she found the prank cruel, understood it. She understood what we had been through. She didn't approve, but she didn't condemn him either. She knew the deep well of fear my brother had stood in while waiting. My brother, though, he stood firm in his decision. 10 minutes, he'd told himself, just 10 minutes of the same torment he'd endured. His logic? My husband deserved a taste of the anguish we'd been forced to endure. But now, it was more than just a prank. It was the seed of a bitter rift between them. Before all of this, my brother and husband had been cordial but not close. Now, the tension was palpable. Every time my husband entered the room, my brother's expression hardened. The disdain was clear. The once neutral air had been replaced with animosity, sharp and biting. And my brother? He wasn't backing down. He stayed close, checking on me, making sure I had everything I needed as I healed. His protective instincts had kicked into overdrive. He wasn't going anywhere. Meanwhile, my husband raged. He couldn't understand why my brother wouldn't apologize for the prank. He demanded I force my brother to make amends. When I explained that my brother had only taken my phone because my husband hadn't been there, my husband exploded. His frustration was palpable, his guilt turning into anger. He couldn't handle the weight of what had happened, and it twisted everything. In an attempt to navigate my own feelings, I sought help. My therapist suggested that the apathy I felt wasn't just about him, it was the trauma speaking. The shock, the grief, the emotional roller coaster I had been on were all playing into the numbness I felt. But there was no clear solution to this mess. My family, my husband, all of us, tangled in pride, pain, and unmet expectations. My mother-in-law sent me texts, calling my family cruel for what had happened, demanding I cut ties with my brother. And my husband, echoing her sentiment, made the same demand. I didn't know what to do. I wasn't in the right state of mind. I couldn't bear being in the same room as him. I had taken refuge in the guest room, where I could just breathe. But my husband couldn't leave it alone. The paternity test. Again. I was done. Done with the stress, the accusations. I told him, coldly, to either leave me alone or go stay with his mother if that was how he intended to make me feel. I wasn't myself. I could feel the weight of everything pulling me under. I didn't know who I was anymore. Postpartum depression, maybe. PTSD, probably. But I needed more opinions. More clarity. It wasn't clear-cut. This situation was no simple decision, no easy answer. The anger was real. The hurt was real. The betrayal, the fight, it was all real. But what about the prank? Was it too much? Was it justified? Everyone's pride was getting in the way of healing. And yet, if I had to choose right now, it would be my brother. Without a second thought. He had been there for me. He had rushed to my side. He had stayed with me through the worst of it, when my husband was unreachable. My brother put his feelings aside, made no demands, and gave everything for me. But here I was, torn. The love I shared with my husband, the life we built, it complicated everything. The betrayal, the absence, the paternity test suggestion, it all cut too deep. My therapist said that I was numbing out from the trauma, not from a lack of love. But how could I reconcile the man I loved with the man who failed me when I needed him most? The love I had for him, the life we had built, felt shattered by his absence in the darkest moment of my life. The weight of this situation is unbearable. I can't fathom the idea of healing while he's still out there, somewhere, knowing that it was me calling and yet never offering an explanation for why he ignored me. In the beginning, I thought I could take my time to decide what to do next, but now, I realize I can't forget the torture of waiting for him to come back, convinced he'd never truly leave me, no matter how angry he was. The moment that changed everything remains etched in my mind, vivid and painfully sharp. The contractions hit hard, relentless, each one more intense than the last. I was on my knees, struggling to breathe through the waves of pain, clutching my phone like it was my only lifeline. With every unanswered ring, the isolation swallowed me whole. I kept hoping, praying that he'd pick up, that he'd be there, that he'd support me through this, the most critical moment of my life. But with each voicemail, reality sank deeper. He wasn't coming. It wasn't just a missed call, it was a betrayal. A trust shattered at the most vulnerable time in my life. I needed him, not just as my husband, but as my partner, the father of our child. The person I thought would never let me down, especially not when I needed him the most, was absent. The fear I felt wasn't just for myself, but for our unborn daughter. My heart raced, terrified for her safety, scared of what could happen if I didn't get help in time. That moment haunts me, replaying over and over, the sting of betrayal and loneliness never fading. I don't think there's any coming back from this. It's not something that can be wiped away or forgiven easily. The breach of trust runs so deep, it shakes the very foundation of everything we built. And then I think of my daughter. I want to be the example she deserves. I can't let her grow up thinking it's okay to stay with someone who breaks your trust in the worst possible way. She deserves to see what a real, healthy relationship looks like, one based on love, respect, and honesty. Staying with someone who has shattered that trust. It sends the wrong message, one I refuse to let her absorb. I want her to know her worth, to grow up understanding the importance of being with someone who truly cherishes her. I've already made up my mind. I'll be contacting an attorney in the coming weeks. Thankfully, we have a prenup in place, so the process should be smoother than it could have been. Things became even clearer when a friend asked me if I would still trust him to sign off on my medical papers. The answer was immediate and strong: no. I wouldn't trust him. I'd rather have my old college roommate sign them. That's how little faith I have left. I could never have ignored his calls like that, not unless I had told him I was unavailable. Even then, I would have at least been more responsive. Having my brother and sister-in-law here has been a huge comfort. Their presence makes all the difference, especially with my sister-in-law being a nurse. She was there with me through the birth, and her calm demeanor, along with her medical knowledge, has been invaluable as I recover. Knowing she's just a room away, ready to help at a moment's notice, gives me the security I desperately need. Her support has created a bond between us that didn't exist before, one I'm grateful for. And then there's my brother, always my rock. He stepped up in ways I never expected, taking care of errands, helping with the baby, and offering an ear whenever I needed to talk. His unwavering support has been more than just comforting, it's been a lifeline. I've always known he'd protect me, but now, more than ever, I see the depth of his love for me and our family. I also told my old friends about the baby, and their reactions have been overwhelmingly positive. They were thrilled for me, eager to help, and ready to show up. They've been alternating visits to bring meals, lend a hand with chores, and offer much-needed breaks. Just knowing I have a network of friends, even though we don't see each other as often as we used to, reminds me that I'm not alone. Their support has lifted my spirits. They've shared their own parenting stories, given advice, and simply been there to listen. It's reassuring to know that I'm not navigating this journey on my own. This collective support has been crucial in helping me handle the overwhelming emotions of new motherhood and the complexities of my strained relationship with my husband. And while none of this even touches on the paternity test, I'll be getting it done for the legal proceedings. It's something he insists on, so I'll follow through. At least I know I'm safe, my daughter is healthy, and that she's as sweet as can be. She sleeps peacefully, nursing easily, such a relief when everything still feels so painful. This decision, finally making it, has lifted a huge weight off my shoulders. My sister-in-law has been instrumental in helping us bond as a family. I'm not great at keeping diaries or journals, but writing to people feels different, and it's helped me see things more clearly. Even my therapist commented that I seem calmer now, more centered. I may give journaling another try, just as she suggested. I'm moving forward with the divorce, because I no longer trust him. Trust is everything. Without it, a relationship falls apart. His unfounded doubts, his suggestion of a paternity test, it all crushed the trust we had worked so hard to build. A relationship must be grounded in belief, without needing constant reassurance. Enduring the trauma of betrayal taught me the importance of emotional resilience. Despite the pain, the fear, the hurt, I had to find the strength to keep going, for my daughter, for myself. Life throws unimaginable challenges our way, but we must summon the strength to rise above them.